morning, everybody, and welcome to another breakfast briefing with Represent PA. We are the PAC in Pennsylvania dedicated to electing progressive pro-choice women to the state legislature. But today we're going to take, and I'm Christine Jacobs, I'm the executive director of this organization. Today, we're going to take a slightly different view of Pennsylvania. We don't endorse for judicial races. We don't have a role in the process, but we like to educate and provide instruction and knowledge for all of our the people who pay attention to represent. And it's a growing group. We're taking in funds. We're building a bench of people who want to know about issues. And that's the purpose of the overview today of the upcoming judicial elections. But I want to start with something before we get to the elections. This picture just really made me happy the other day when I saw it online. SB 108 was just passed and signed. I think it's one of the first, if not the first bill that Governor Shapiro got to sign. And it's an issue. It's proposed several years ago and required insurers to cover the cost for genetic counseling and testing if they thought it was medically necessary. If a woman came in and needed breast screening and the doctor said, oh, you need an MRI or an ultrasound or genetic counseling to make sure that you don't have breast cancer, or to understand the source of your breast cancer, insurers used to charge for this, and it was not required that it be covered. Kim Ward, who was the Senator pro tem, a Republican, Senate pro tem, the head of the Republicans in the PA Senate, had breast cancer and wanted this passed several years ago, but could not get her caucus to do it. It could not get coverage. And so with the new Democratic majority and with a woman speaker in the House in Harrisburg, this passed the House and then went on and passed the Senate. And look at this picture. Many of these women are people that we've supported to represent, and they all came out, and they, with their male colleagues, came out and supported this. This is the value of a Democratic majority. This is the value of having people who care about our issues. The next one we're going to be watching is the Fairness Act, which was just passed by the House. It is the one that requires non-discrimination against for people who are gay, for the whole LGBTQ community. And it's a wonderful act. It's a great thing. Everybody in the House was so thrilled. This was first proposed 20 years ago, and they're so thrilled to get it passed. But there's a worry that it's not even going to get heard in the Senate, and that the Senate is not even going to take up the issue. They're going to ignore it the way they've ignored so many other things. And what do we need to do about that? We need to get mad. And we need to really work harder to maintain our Democratic majority in the House and then bring about a Democratic majority in the Senate. And you're going to hear more about that later in our call. But let's talk about the court system. You know, just a brief overview. The state Supreme Court system currently has 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans, which adds to 6. We have the court rules on so many issues of importance to all of us. And it also upholds or overturns decisions from the governor and the state legislature. The court intervenes when the state government failed to come up with a congressional map that made sense. The court intervenes on issues about voting rights and so many other things. And yet we all look at our ballots and go, I don't even know who these people are, and I don't know why I should care. And that's why we have today's call. Next slide. So who do we have talking about it? We have the Honorable Judge Patricia McInerney today. She's currently a mediator, but she served 23 years as a judge for the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. But she really has a great overview, and you're going to hear that today, a great overview of the entire court system and why you should care in Pennsylvania. We also have Debbie Gross on our call. Debbie was a former president of the Philadelphia Bar. She has a long history in legal matters, and currently she's the president and CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. She's joined us in the past, and by popular acclaim, she's back again to talk about the judicial elections and why you should care. So take it away, Debbie and Pat.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Debbie Gross. I'm the CEO of PMC, Pennsylvania's Modern Courts. I'm going to give you a disclaimer at the moment that we are a nonpartisan nonprofit. And so I just want you to know that's where I'm coming from when we have this discussion. We aren't here to give you any specific recommendations as to who to vote for, but we're to give you information. We're here to give you information to help you make an educated decision as to whom to vote. I have a very detailed slideshow. I'm going to skip through a lot of it, but I will make it available. Chris, I can send it to you in a PDF and you can send it out to everybody so they can look at it.
Yeah, Tiffany will send it out as part of the follow-up that we send for all of our events.
Okay, great. And there was one other, well, we'll figure it out. Oh, I know what it is. So you'll hear, so there's on next Tuesday, there is at PMC, and I'll skip to that slide shortly, is holding a appellate court judicial candidate forum. It's from 6 to 7:30. You can register on our website. It will be like speed dating because there will be 12 candidates on for an hour and a half of questions, but it's going to give you a feel, I'll say, of the candidates. Okay, so quickly, PMC is, again, a nonpartisan nonprofit. We do a lot of education about the court system. We go into high schools and teach civics. We go into community centers and teach about, family law, criminal law, landlord-tenant law. We are across the Commonwealth. We provide, judicial election forums, and I encourage you to check out our website because we have a lot of information on who's running and the offices for which they're running. Okay, so, and here's the ad for our candidate form. I think you should even be able to scan the QR code from your phone and register. So we have it again at the end. And we are here, we're going to talk quickly. And if I'm talking too quickly, just let me know, to discuss, why are state courts important, what types of cases are heard before each court, and about election of judges, right? What limitations are placed on judicial candidates? What do bar association ratings mean? All these are really important to help you formulate your decision as to whom to vote. I am joined by the wonderful Pat McInerney. I spent many years in practice before Judge McInerney, and I very much was challenged and enjoyed it. So a little bit about our Pennsylvania court system. It's the oldest, we have the oldest Supreme Court in the country. We have the first Constitution in the country. Our Constitution is actually broader than the U.S. Constitution, so we should all know that. And I'll leave the rest on the slide. So, Your Honor, do you want to give a little bit about our triangular structure of our court system?
Sure. We start at the top with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and do you want me to go to the slide in terms of all our judges are elected? So
sure.
It's a 10-year term. After 10 years, then there's a retention vote. I can explain that in a minute. Then we have the intermediate appellate courts. We have the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. And I think the Superior Court is considered the busiest court in our Commonwealth. Every criminal court, every criminal case that's appealed goes to Superior Court. And that's part of the reason why it's the busiest court in Pennsylvania. Then we have the Court of Common Pleas, which is the trial level court, which I obviously think is the most important court in Pennsylvania because that's the court I sat on, but also because if you have a trial and the judge at the trial level decides an issue based on fact, that is not appealable. Only what's appealable are legal issues. So if a judge makes a decision that they believe someone or don't believe someone, unless it's way out in left field, that's not going to be appealable. So that's a very, very powerful position, not to mention the fact that it's criminal, civil, and family. And family, we have retired Judge Flora Wolf on this call this morning, is probably the most important court because it deals with custody and adoptions and everything else that has to deal with families. And it doesn't always get the credit that it should, but it's an incredibly important court in Pennsylvania, and you're voting for people who are going to be sitting in family court and making those decisions. Then we have what we call the lower level courts. The municipal court is unique to Philadelphia, and the magisterial district courts in all the other counties. I don't know as much about the magisterial district courts. Debbie, you do, but I don't believe they have to be lawyers.
Nope.
But in municipal court in Philadelphia, they do. Municipal court in Philadelphia hears all the preliminary hearings for criminal cases, and they hear landlord-tenant court. And if you have a trial, you're arrested for a misdemeanor in Philadelphia, and you're going to have a trial, that's first in municipal court, and it's only a bench trial. And because under the Constitution, you have an automatic right to a jury trial, you can have a full trial in municipal court. And then if you don't like the sentence that you get, you can appeal that to the common pleas court and have a jury trial. So the judges in municipal court hear the first level of those cases.
So as Pat said, you know, the minor judiciaries, this is the municipal court and the magisterial district court. So we both are important terminologies. So in Philadelphia, it's municipal court. Everywhere outside of Philly, whoever's on outside of Philly and in neighboring counties, for other counties in Pennsylvania, it's magisterial district courts. What's very interesting about these, and you all probably have judges on the ballot for municipal court and the MDJs. The interesting thing, and I'm emphasizing this and I'm not taking a position, is that MDJs don't have to be lawyers. All they have to be is 21 years of age, live in the Commonwealth, reside in their district for a year. They do have to pass an exam that is put out by the Minor Judiciary Education Board, which I am a member of, so everybody knows. The exam is after 4 weeks of classes about the laws that that they will be handling. I will say, if you're an attorney, you don't have to pass that initial certification exam. What you have to be is admitted to the bar in Pennsylvania, meaning you've passed, you've graduated law school, passed the bar exam, and MDJs do have a continuing judicial education requirement of 40 hours a week for 40 hours for a year, I'll say. The continuing judicial education for judges is actually not as much. So there is a difference in the education that's provided for MDJs, but it is also interesting that it is not required. There's no requirement to be an attorney, just because this was really the people's court. These were the courts that were first established, many, many years ago. Wait, why does this seem like we're out of order? Hold on a minute. Something happened here. Okay, but what happened to my slides of the? Okay, so this is just as Pat said, we have two courts that are our intermediate appellate courts. The Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. The Superior Court is the busiest court. We have, it's 15 judges. This is our Commonwealth Court. Something's with their slides. Okay, this is our Superior Court. It's actually a majority of women right now. So, there's 6,000 cases filed each year. There's 3,500 opinions published and non-published. So a judge for this court is going to write a lot. That's really important. They need to, cases are, as Pat says, cases are on appeal to this court from a lower court decision. So they are going to have a hearing on these cases. On some of them, they don't even have to have hearings on all the appeals. They can decide whether to take the case and write on it without a hearing. But it is it's a very busy court. Pat, do you want to say anything else about the Superior Court?
No, except that they sit in 3-judge panels for the most part, because they have so many cases to hear, and lawyers in. I know mostly about Philadelphia. I don't know a lot about the other counties, but lawyers in Philadelphia will often complain that because they are so busy, they don't really give them enough hearings on enough cases, and they don't reverse a lot of cases. But they do work very hard, and they have law clerks that help them obviously write these opinions.
And the other thing that's important for you to know is that oh my goodness, they could be, this is it, they could be the last word in our state. So while we all think that the Supreme Court, has the final say about Pennsylvania law or interpretation of Pennsylvania law, sometimes matters are not appealed from a decision of the Superior Court, or sometimes the Supreme Court doesn't take a matter that's appealed from the Superior Court. So there are often times when the decisions issued by our Superior Court are the final say about the law in our state. So you need to keep that in mind also, that that there is a heavy weight placed on a decision by our Superior Court. And these are two examples of recent cases that were decided by our Superior Court. The other appellate, and there's two current vacancies in our Superior Court. So you will, on your ballot, you will see running more than 2 individuals for the Superior Court. I'll explain to you how you find out information about those individuals in a few minutes. The other court that's an appellate court is our Commonwealth Court. Again, remarkably, wonderfully, it is again majority women. And our Commonwealth Court is really a unique court in our state. And you need to understand that. It is, there are, not only in our state, but in our country. We are one of I think there's only one other state that has a court like our Commonwealth Court. It handles matters, appeals from state agency. It handles matters brought by or against state agencies, townships, state-focused litigation. And for example, the Commonwealth Court Judge Jubileer just issued a 800-page decision finding that the current funding for education in Pennsylvania was not constitutional. Again, this court is really important because it too could have the last word, I will say, about the law in Pennsylvania. That decision came after 10 years of hard-fought litigation, many months of trial before the Commonwealth Court, and the decision was not appealed. It was a very factual decision, and neither party appealed it. So it is the current law in Pennsylvania that the way we fund our education is unconstitutional. Your Honor, do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay. And so then our highest appellate court is our Supreme Court, which is coming up in okay, well, where's our picture? There they are. There's our Supremes. So right now we have 6 spots on our Supreme Court. We have 1 opening. The opening was caused by I'll say the premature and unfortunate death of the prior Chief Justice Max Baer, but he was turning 75, which is the retirement age in Pennsylvania of judges. So he was actually being forced to retire last year, and there would have been an election for a seat. The other thing that's really important here is that we have the first female Chief Justice in Pennsylvania ever. Over 300 years it took to get our first female Chief Justice, Deborah Todd. All I can tell you is she will be here for 6 years. She will be amazing. She is compassionate, thoughtful. She was very involved in establishing an Elder Justice Task Force, which is now an Elder Justice Advisory Council. And as we know, our Supreme Court is officially the rule of the interpreter of the laws of Pennsylvania. Recently, they just took up a decision. They just took up a products liability matter to address whether, with respect to guns, and to address whether a federal statute is overbroad and impinges, I'll say, on Pennsylvania's laws, or is unconstitutional under Pennsylvania law. So, as Chris said, our Supreme Court decisions are very important. Most decisions by our Pennsylvania Supreme Court have a greater impact on your everyday life than decisions of our US Supreme Court. Pat, do you have anything?
Yeah, and a lot of the cases, they have a procedure called aliquotter. So whether or not they hear a case, they grant a petition to aliquotter to hear the case. And that's why what Debbie was saying about Superior Court is also very important, because if they don't grant aliquotter, the Superior Court opinion stays. If they grant it, then they make a decision themselves.
And so you can actually find, all the decisions issued by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the Superior Court, the Commonwealth Court are available on the Pennsylvania Court's website. That's www.pacourts.us. So you can actually go on and read decisions by judges. There's also a Pennsylvania appellate blog, which I've cited here because it will tell you summaries of case decisions, will also tell you when arguments are being held. You can watch Supreme Court and Superior Court and Commonwealth Court arguments by going on pacourts.us as well. And so, part of the process of educating yourself is going on the website, because a lot of the candidates who are running for higher courts come from a lower court, I'll say, or come from, there are candidates for the Supreme Court who are judges on the Superior Court. So it's important that you educate yourself as to how they've decided a case. The other thing that's also important is that our Supreme Court doesn't just decide cases, it doesn't just sit and hear cases or read briefs. They have a lot of administrative responsibilities, and I really think that this is lost by many people, but they have an administrative office of Pennsylvania courts. They educate judges. They do the budgeting of our court system. I'm going to put a plug in here. We are, the judiciary is supposed to be an independent third branch. However, it is dependent on the legislature for its funding. So when the legislature is not particularly pleased with a judicial decision, it typically makes a threat to the budget, or it makes a threat, to how we elect our judges, I know that I was on here a couple of years ago, so that constitutional amendment I'll use your terminology, to gerrymander how we vote for the Supreme Court was defeated. So that constitutional amendment is no longer a threat, but there have been other threats via constitutional amendments when the legislature hasn't been happy with decisions of our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has a Judicial Conduct Board. Pat, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The Judicial Conduct Board has two parts to it. So citizens can make a complaint about a judge. Anybody can make a complaint about a judge, and the Judicial Conduct Board would investigate that. And then there's a separate court of judicial discipline that would decide whether or not discipline is appropriate and what the discipline should be. And there are, I don't remember how many people are on the Judicial Conduct Board, but there are some lay people on the Judicial Conduct Board. And they investigate the complaints that are made.
And it's important. I mean, we all have, I heard this morning more news about some of our US Supreme Court justices and some of their, as they don't have a code of conduct that they have to adhere to, and there's no oversight of them other than by impeachment. But here we do have oversight of our judges. It is truly important. It is used. Recently the Judicial Conduct Board reprimanded a Court of Common Pleas judge because of statements made on their Facebook page. So it does actively, I will say, engage in business, in the Judicial Conduct Board business. So and it is not a lame duck. I mean, it is really important. The other thing that our court has are special committees. These committees, everybody here can join a committee. The Supreme Court puts out notices of when it needs members. It encourages non-lawyers to participate as well. Special committees are such as rules committees, disciplinary board committees, education committees, how our criminal rules should be revised, how our civil rules should be revised. What should we do with respect to pro se litigation and informa paupers, which means that somebody's can't afford to pay for the filing fees. There's a lot that their court does to support access to justice through these committees. So it's important for you to get involved. And then it regulates the practice of law, disciplines attorneys, admits attorneys. But our court does a lot, but also will welcome non-lawyer participation in its activities. Okay, so just a little bit quickly about retention elections, because Pat mentioned it. So we are right now in the primary. You will not see any reference to the term retention election. Okay, this is in the November general, and it is when after a judge has sat for 10 years, it is a decision by the voters as to whether this judge should continue for another 10 years. It's a yay or nay vote. It's nonpartisan. You actually do not know the party. Pat, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yes. In Philadelphia, for example, when you run for retention, I don't think anyone has ever not been retained. Even though there have been some campaigns against certain judges because they felt like the electorate felt like they didn't do very well in their first 10-year term, and actively the newspapers and tried to get them to not be retained, because a lot of people don't pay attention when they vote, and because it is just a yes/no vote, and because there will be a lot of judges on the ballot at one time, maybe 10, maybe 11, and there's oftentimes an effort to say vote yes for the retention judges as a whole. There's never been somebody not retained, and Judge Wolf, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's ever been somebody not retained in Philadelphia. In the other counties, it's very different.
Right. And we've had some higher appellate court judges who have not been retained.
Right. Right.
The other thing that's important, and you mentioned this, is everybody should know only historically, 20% of our electorate vote in odd numbered years. And then that number decreases in November in the general election. So more people come out for the primary because there are more, it's more well known, I'll say, contested elections such as our mayor's race, such as city council. In Allegheny, they have a district attorney race. So and a city council race as well, and city controller. So therefore, more people come out for the May race because they think or the May primary, sorry, they think that's where things will be decided. But it's really important to continue your stepping up and voting and come to out for the general election.
Yeah, and the purpose of the 10-year term is to protect the judges in a way to be able to make decisions without being worried about being voted out of office. But the retention election then is pretty much the only way to get rid of a judge, unless the Judicial Conduct Board should remove them. And the Conduct Board has removed judges, particularly in Philadelphia.
And you can find out information about judges again for retention. The appellate court judges write decisions. They are available. They are public. They are available on the pacourts.us. The lower courts don't always write decisions, but there are investigations done by the area bar associations with respect to retention elections, and we will discuss that shortly as well. So the next is the limitation on rules governing judicial candidates and judges. And the reason I put a slide in here for this is that I personally was very surprised by the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Not the outcome, but what everything that led up to it, right? It was a $50 million in campaign funding. The judges took positions on issues. Our rules of conduct do not allow judges to answer questions about issues that will be in front of them, that they anticipate will be in front of them, that are currently in front of them. They, so there's two different ways that our judges are limited by about this. One is actually in our Constitution. Okay, it talks about what activities they can engage in, and what they can't engage in. Right? They have to be full-time judges. Although I'm going to give you a caveat again. Magisterial district judges do not have to be full-time. They can have a business on the side. They can have a law firm on the side. So it's another little difference in our with our MDJs. So those are our constitutional duties, and then there's the Judicial Code of Conduct. I have the website for it because it's really important for you to understand, I'll say, the limitations that are imposed on judges and judicial candidates. So, for example, they can't make right statements in connection with cases, controversies, or issues that are likely to come before the court. They can't make pledges, promises, or commitments that are inconsistent with the impartial performance of the adjudicative duties of judicial office. I have not looked into what the judicial rules of conduct are for Wisconsin, but the rules in Pennsylvania would prohibit and should prohibit our candidates from answering an issue that says, how would you rule on gun control? How would you rule on abortion? These are issues that are likely to come before the court. Pat, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the most important issue, I think, for judges. When you're going to run for judge, when you become a judge, you have to decide that you're going to be neutral, and you're human, but to the most extent that you can, you're going to put apart your personal preferences and your personal ideas and rule fairly on any issue that comes before you. So if you're able to just be running on certain issues, and obviously you can't be neutral when you get a case in front of you. You've already made a decision, or you've already had a bent towards a certain decision.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was wondering, like, now that these judges have campaigned on issues, will they then recuse themselves from deciding those issues? I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Right.
And so the canons also talk specifically about campaign activity, right? It's really important. They are very limited they actually can't be involved in a political organization. They can't make a speech on behalf of a political organization or on behalf of a candidate for any public office. The funding and solicitation is very restrictive also. A judge or a candidate for a judicial officer cannot ask for money. They cannot walk up to you and say, can you give me money to support my campaign? They have a campaign committee that can do that, but they are not allowed to do that because that judge might see you, in court one day. Your Honor, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Every campaign, if you have a campaign, you have to have a treasurer and a campaign manager. But the treasurer is the only person who can accept the funds and who has to keep track of the funds. Even if you go to a fundraiser, say at somebody's house for a judicial candidate, they're not actually supposed to have anything to do with any of the checks that people are bringing or leaving. That has to go through the treasurer. It's supposed to insulate the candidate from who is giving them contributions. It's a little bit ironic, and it was always an issue with the statewide ethics committee that judges could go to ask questions about, as to whether or not judges could write thank you notes. So how can you write a thank you note for a contribution if you're not supposed to know who contributed to your campaign?
Right.
But they did decide that they could write thank you notes, and then they just wouldn't theoretically know how much or who gave overwhelming amounts to a particular campaign.
So these are important guidelines, I'll say, which candidates should adhere to. So again, I'm educating you. So if a candidate doesn't adhere to the code of judicial conduct, that's a light bulb type of thing. So you should just know that there are these rules out there by which govern candidates' behavior and with respect to the elections. Okay, so I wanted to, where am I? So I wanted to talk now quickly. I know it's already 10 after 9 about how we evaluate candidates, right? Because I get tons of calls from people saying, who should I vote for? I really don't want to tell people who to vote for. So I want you to make your own decision. So there are many factors that should be considered, right? Their legal experience, off the bat. I can hands down say an attorney with 1 year of experience should not be running for a judge, right? That's, Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, 10 years at least.
Right, I would agree with that. They have to have a reputation for integrity and fairness, right? I personally, this is my own personal opinion, think that they should be involved in the community. They should be giving back. They're running for a judge. They are a public servant. I very much appreciate all that judges do, but I want to make sure that they know who their community is. They should be engaged in, continuing educational and professional activities. They should have a commitment to equal justice. If you want to find out whether the candidate has been reprimanded as an attorney or as a judge, you can do that search on the internet, and these are the websites. The other fortunate thing is that bar associations evaluate the candidates. The Pennsylvania Bar Association, and the websites will be listed on these slides. The Pennsylvania Bar Association investigates and evaluates and makes a recommendation with respect to appellate court candidates. The Philadelphia Bar Association investigates, evaluates, and makes a recommendation with respect to Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia, Philadelphia Municipal Court, as well as appellate court candidates who have their main offices in Philadelphia. The Allegheny County Bar Association makes recommendation, investigates, evaluates, and makes recommendations for Allegheny County Municipal Court MDJs, for Court of Common Pleas, as well as appellate court candidates whose main offices are in Allegheny County. And then across the state, each county bar association has different guidelines, which are on their websites. The Lancaster County Bar Association does an investigation and makes a recommendation for its Court of Common Pleas. The Montgomery County Bar Association investigates and makes a recommendation for its Court of Common Pleas. How each bar association makes a decision is also fully transparent and on their website. It's really important because you shouldn't just say, okay, they've been recommended, but understand why and how. So I have a few slides about this process, but I'm going to speak personally, I'll say, to the Philadelphia Bar Association's process because I know it. I sat on that commission. It is so the commission is made up of 35 people. You are not asked your party affiliation. The Philadelphia Bar Association has 5 non-lawyers. Philadelphia Bar Association's Judicial Commission has 5 non-lawyers that sit on this committee. It also has the district attorney or representative from the district attorney from the city, representative or the public defender from the city, has the federal U.S. attorney, has the federal defender, has individuals who head the various sections in the Philadelphia Bar Association, such as family law, criminal law, public interest law. It has a representative from the trial lawyers, so that's the plaintiff side. It has a representative from the defense lawyers association, so it's the defense side. So it tries to get a well-rounded sample of people who could give an opinion, an educated decision. Pat, did you ever sit on that?
No.
Okay, so it does have the it has I think, a president judge of municipal court, the president judge of the Court of Common Pleas, and those judges do recuse themselves, I will say, if there's a judge that's, running for election and they are not comfortable making a decision on, so and so how this commission sits every Friday, but what happens before this commission sits is that there are investigative teams. So there's a 5-person investigative team that is put together to investigate a candidate. So the candidate fills out a questionnaire. Questionnaires are often available. The completed questionnaires, also for your information, are available on the various bar associations websites. So the candidate fills out a completed questionnaire. This 5-person investigative team gets put together. It also includes one non-lawyer. So anyone who wants to participate in this is welcome. You cannot be working on anyone's judicial campaign. You cannot have made any contributions to anyone's judicial campaigns. But the investigative team has to find 20 people to interview who were not given, whose names were not given by the candidate, which is not always an easy feat. We call judges before whom the candidates have appeared. We call opposing parties. We call co-counsel. We call clients. We call, other lawyers in the community, but we need to have 20 interviews. And there's a series of questions that we ask about the candidate, which I'll put up in front of you quickly, that, to make sure that we feel that this candidate has the experience and the ability to be a judge. The group then interviews the candidate as well, asks a lot of questions, and then the group itself, this investigative team, makes a decision as to whether to recommend or not recommend the candidate. This decision is then presented to the Judicial Commission. They interrogate the person who leads the investigation. The Judicial Commission, wants to know about all the interviews, what was conducted, were they thorough? And then they also interview the candidate. They ask candidates questions, and then they come up with a decision as to whether to recommend, not recommend, or highly recommend. And I'm trying this. I've talked through this. So here are the Judicial Commission evaluation criteria. They have to have the legal ability sufficient to have earned the respect of lawyers and members of the bar. They need to have the trial or other experience. So not everybody is a trial lawyer. Some have been clerks, some could be permanent clerks, some may have been law professors. So, we have to, the investigative team has to push and make sure that the candidate is qualified. They have to have a record and reputation for excellent character and integrity. A candidate should be financially responsible. They shouldn't have filed for bankruptcy, for example, or if they have, do they have a good reason? Is the candidate a defendant or a plaintiff in any kind of litigation? Why? They should possess judicial temperament. I mean, Your Honor, you want to talk about judicial temperament?
Very important to have good judicial temperament.
Right. I mean, patience.
Whatever that means.
But it means patience. It means that you should be respectful of the individuals in front of you. You shouldn't be losing your cool. You shouldn't be showing your personal opinion. Shouldn't be asking to be written into a song. Those kinds of things. How's that?
I'll ask about the song one later. We need to be wrapping up, Debbie.
Okay.
So
sorry. Okay, so this is the evaluations are really important. I'm going to put to the last slide. These are where you can go to find out information about this. I just can't emphasize enough. You need to vote. Feel free also to share these slides with others. Join us at our appellate court candidate forum. We'll also have another one in October before the general election. And I will stop sharing, Chris.
no, thank you. And I think you've answered most of the questions that have come up, including the one that I loved just now, which is, and what are all the reasons that somebody might not be endorsed? Well, you mentioned what the criteria is, so we'll go on from there.
So if they don't participate in the process, they're found
Right.
not.
So some candidates choose not to participate in the process. They feel it's, already decided, they, whatever the reason. And so also the other thing that you should know is that if they, and I know that this is, I can't remember which candidate this is, but for example, if the candidate goes through the entire process, gets a not recommended rating from the Bar Association, they are given an opportunity to withdraw from the election so that you would not know.
No.
But there has recently been a candidate who said he or she was going to withdraw from the election, then didn't. So then I can't remember which Bar Association, the Bar Association did issue a statement saying that this candidate was not recommended. And the reason they weren't current with that disclosure was because they were told that the individual was withdrawing.
Wonderful. That's the state of our judicial system. And maybe that is a discussion for a future meeting of what is the current state of our judicial system up and down the line, and what could we do about it. But I want to thank Pat and Debbie today for participating, for sharing what's going on in these races. It's really important. And somebody in the chat, Tom Vernon, I think, made the comment that because we don't have open primaries, there are a lot of people who don't show up to the May elections when a lot of things are decided that are non-partisan. And this is an example of something that everybody should be allowed to participate in, but people don't know that they can. So thank you very much for your discussion and for sharing this with us. And Tiffany, why don't we move on to our closing slides? I got to tell you that, we talked about this at the beginning, and I keep reminding people, this is not an off year. There are 2 open seats right now in the Pennsylvania House. The decisions will be decided on May. There will be decisions after May 15th. Represent has endorsed Heather Boyd in Delaware County. We've given her $10,000 of our current income because we think this is very important. Anybody in the Philadelphia area, anybody across Pennsylvania want to make phone calls, want to support her, go right ahead. But please do. It's very important that she win this race to maintain our majority in Harrisburg. The Senate, keep talking about this one too. We got 22 Democrats and 28 Republicans. We with the caucus have evaluated the open seats. There are 3 that are most flippable, which would bring us to a tie, and our lieutenant governor would be allowed to vote in those cases. These are going to be very, very expensive races. We're hoping to have strong women running. I know at least one of them will. And we've got to work on raising money so that we can contribute to these campaigns and bring about at least a tie in the Senate. And early campaign support is going to be very necessary. We invested $700,000 last cycle in races. We want to be $1 million PAC. But through your work and through your contributions to our efforts, we achieved a level where people respect us and they know that Represent PA talks for progressive issues, and we want to be a stronger voice there. By the way, I should have mentioned we did have our Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts is a nonpartisan organization, as Debbie Gross said. Represent PA is a very partisan organization. There is no doubt that we are very partisan, and we take great pride in that. So I should have some kind of bell or something that goes off that says, now we talk partisanship. I'm talking partisanship. What do we do? How have we grown? We've grown through educating Pennsylvanians on what happens in Harrisburg. This is your civics lesson. And I've heard this from a lot of people who are on our calls, that we provide them civics as to what's going on in Harrisburg. We believe very strongly that you should be aligning your values with legislation. This isn't something you can leave to chance. we can affect change. And so how do you do it? And what's your role? Share your enthusiasm for your work with their friends. We view the breakfast briefings to be our best communication strategy. Think about hosting an event for us. I've been waiting to push people about events until after the primaries, but we're going to start doing that because we think if you meet candidates and you understand what's going on and you break bread with your friends and talk about these issues, you will give generously, your friends will give generously, and we can really change Pennsylvania. I said this at the beginning. Look at the laws. Pay attention to what is going on in Harrisburg right now in the House. The laws that they are passing are just amazing. They're things like the Fairness Act that they've tried to get passed for 20 years, and the Republicans would not go along with it. But we need to continue these efforts in the House, and we need to get a Democratic Senate. Did I mention this is the very partisan part of our discussion today? Next briefing, May 17th, one of the building a stronger village for our children. We're going to talk about childcare in Pennsylvania. And it's been a discussion that's been going on in Harrisburg. There's been a lot of hearings about it. A lot of the fact that the average childcare worker in Pennsylvania makes 13 something an hour, and they're not being paid for the support that they give our children. We need volunteers, so please put your name in the chat, send us a note. We're going to be ramping, as I said, we're going to be ramping up on a lot of these efforts as soon as the primaries are over. And support represent. Now I want to bring on Bill Ewing, if we could get Bill Ewing to talk for a minute. He asked, speaking of partisan, this is not a represent endorsement, but Bill wanted to say a couple words about Debbie Kunzelman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine. Debbie Kunzelman is a candidate for the Supreme Court. There are two candidates in the Democratic primary for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. One of them is a guy named McCaffrey, and he's the only one we've heard about around here. All the local and nearby Democratic parties seem to have endorsed him. And you know, apparently he's a good judge. But I said Deborah Kunzelman is from Beaver County near Pittsburgh, and what do we know about her? Here's a woman running for the Supreme Court. And so I asked a friend of mine who's in Western Pennsylvania, a trial lawyer, and she wrote back and said, well, I had a trial before Deborah Kunzelman when she was on the Common Pleas Court in Beaver County, and she's great, absolutely great. She was considerate, she listened, she gave a great decision, and it was upheld on appeal, and that she's very well respected by lawyers out in the western part of the state. So I wanted to put in a word because I think we ought to vote for the woman candidate who is very well respected, and it's just because the party around this part of the state decided to endorse the man as usual, that doesn't seem to be a good enough reason for me.
Thank you. And everybody should know Bill Ewing has been a supporter of Represent PA since the beginning. And he is a very strong supporter of women running for office and women in office. I put in the chat earlier that right now, with our head of the Supreme Court being a woman, with the Republican president pro tem of the Senate as a woman, and the Republican speaker, the Democratic speaker as a woman, we now have two of our three branches of government in Pennsylvania run by women. The only one that is not is our governor, and we're pushing him hard to make sure that at least the women around him affect how he's what he's supporting and how he's governing. We've also never had a woman senator, and Bob Casey's running for re-election. I just like to remind people that we need to push the women where we can, because they're making a difference, and the kinds of things they talk about and work on are making a difference. So thank you, Bill. And thank you everybody else for being on with us today. It is just about 9:30. And I'm looking for other topics that you want us to discuss. A couple of things that we think we're going to be doing soon are, and you know about the childcare one. We're working on one just to get some of our current state reps on to talk about how different it feels to be in the majority. I was in Harrisburg yesterday, and I heard some comments that a few of the Republican members of the House are kind of depressed because they have no authority and no one's listening to them anymore. And it made me feel so good, so good. And that's the effect that we've been having. And not only are the Republicans not in charge, but it's Democratic women are leading the charge here. And the issues that they're talking about are the things that are important to us. And where the women are not the chair of committees, they're pushing their chairs who are decided by seniority. They're pushing hard to get the legislation that we've all wanted. The goal for 2024 is to make us into Minnesota or into Michigan. There's 2 states where there's a trifecta of Democrats, and the Democrats, just watch what's going on in Michigan in terms of gun laws, in terms of abortion, in terms of so many other things. When you have the trifecta, which we've been through in Pennsylvania with the Republicans, but when we have all 3 branches headed by Democrats, it's going to be a whole new Pennsylvania. And that's what we're working towards here. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Peace.
Thank you.